Hello, I'm Carl, and welcome to my OP13 Blackbeard Deckbuilding video. Um, just straight up right away, the fact is OP13 has completely destroyed our previous decklists, and we've had to radically change them because of the meta, and this is mostly due to a shift from a KO engine focused build to a Burgess and Blocker build, which cuts almost a third of our deck out of the list. So if we look here, at an OP12 decklist, something relatively standard. Cutting out the KO engine loses us 4 augurs and 4 docks, 4 tempest kicks, and 2 to 3 7-cost teaches, depending on how many we were playing. And now you can see we're already down to 35 cards. We have a lot of space to fill. And right away there's the intuitive answer of, okay, we put Burgess back to 4, and we put my age back to 4, but we're still left with a lot of extra cards, a lot of extra spots that we need to find cards for. And so this is appropriately a black hole in our deck list. And as a result, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of bad ideas about what to fill those holes with. I'm going to be giving some structure, why we changed in the first place, a base list to work with, and also my current deck list. I want to start by explaining the transition of why we shifted over from KO. So Teach is a meta-respondent deck, and so how strong our various answers are depends on what the game plan of the opponent is. And the two main decks that were added and that define the meta at the moment are Emu and Ace. And now we can try to weigh how well our engine goes up against them. Emu is very obvious. His characters have relatively quickly complete immunity from all removal, and our engine is completely dead against them. That's it. The KO engine against Emu is useless. The individual cards, like Augur and Teach, are okay cards without the engine, but they're just not strong enough and they lack the tempo to be able to stand up to Emu. For Emu, it's not even a competition. Next up, we go to to Ace, just as like a default Ace deck list. The 1-costs he plays aren't very important, so Doc doesn't get value by himself. The 4-cost that comes to mind is this Marco, and he is nice to get rid of. However, getting rid of this Marco when the Ace has a Dawn attached draws your opponent 3 cards. A ridiculous amount for 1 card, and we have a much better solution in the form of Black Hole, which prevents the draw too. So even if we could remove the Marco with Augur Dock, we would rather do it with a Black Hole. It's just much more efficient. If we do set up the Teach with the Augur and we can shoot 6 costs, okay, that's nice. He has a couple. He has this Yamato, there's another 6-cost Yamato, there is a Jozu, right? But these are just bridges for Ace. They're not a win condition. He's playing them while setting up for the 10 costs. And that's where the next problem comes in. His win condition is in the form of 10 costs. These 12,000 attack new gates, they are now playing the 9 cost Whitebeard as well. And so that could theoretically be removed. But it's not quite there. And the problem is that they come out soon. If he's on even curve, he'll drop a Whitebeard at 10 cost on 8 Dawn, and then on 9 we don't really have the Dawn to answer that with the KO engine. It will die quickly to his swings, and it's just not effective against him. Next up, Roger. We have two similar problems. The first is that there's no important targets at lower costs. His anything from 3 to 6 is generally just ramp for him on play with no lasting or problematic effects. And so our engine doesn't get much value here. And he's building up to his 10 costs, which again we cannot efficiently kill with our engine. which can only go up to 9 even with 7 cost teach and 2 cost reductions. And so again, our engine fails to actually fight against the enemy win conditions. Then the other deck that's currently popular still and in the meta is Zoro. Now, Zoro has nice targets that we want to get rid of. He has the Cavendish, he has the Tashigi, and getting rid of those efficiently with the engine is very helpful. On top of that, the new forecasts that he's running are easier targets for our Dock Q engine and get a lot of tempo out, and we can also get rid of something like this Zoro. So against Zoro, the engine version is actually fine. However, so is the KO version, and it doesn't make a big difference against Zoro, but against the other decks, it does, and the KO engine just doesn't work very well. Rayleigh, which is still occasionally seen, is slightly worse if you don't have Dock Q, but it's still doable with the 4-cost Shiryu, and just isn't played that much. And on the last note, just to give the KO deck some credit, against blue-purple, the KO version is much stronger because Burgess simply gets bounced, but it's fortunately not being played that much. And we simply have to hope that once the promo Roger comes out, and that makes blue-purple stronger again, that he doesn't become so much more popular that we go back to getting screwed over by blue-purple. I hope that kind of makes clear why the KO engine doesn't work at the moment. Emu is immune, Ace and Roger have 10 cost focus, and so it just doesn't work. Next up, we've established why the KO engine is not very good against some of these meta decks, but how does Burgess fare? So, first of all, the question with Burgess is always how easily is he removed? We look at Emu, and the answer is not at all. Emu has no removal that can get rid of Burgess in any way, shape, or form, except trying to swing into it and hoping that you can't counter or block your way out of it. The same applies to Ace. He has the Jozu bounce, but that is on play, and we will turn that off starting at 6 at the latest. And while they do run Red Rock, they don't really run Gravity Blade, and that would also apply to the Augurs. So he isn't as easily removed. Against Zoro, he can be rested and then swung into by the leader, but because we're playing more blockers to protect him, smaller blockers as well, and because he gets bigger much faster with things like my age, he's no longer an easy target and can actually switch to swinging big into the board that the Zoro is trying to set up. So removal wise, he's just in a much better spot. Roger as well doesn't have anything to get rid of him, and so that's one reason why Burgess is stronger than before. The second is that the bigger swings get a lot of value in the matches. So against Emu, he starts to work towards 10 Don, and he starts to outvalue us, starting at about the second 5 Elders. And we need to be able to kill him quickly. And these Burgess swings that are quickly quite big allow us to both go for his life and clear his board with relatively little problem, and then try to quickly go for game. So the strategy is just more effective, and we have the blockers that are there to support us, to protect both the Burgess and to protect our life, to give us enough time to try to go for game. It's also worth noting that Teach is also nicer in this situation, since he's good at blocking the 10 costs that Ace plays, he's good at freezing the 10 costs that Roger plays, and if you have the time, he can also be nice against Emu by freezing his 7 cost that buffs the other of his 5 Elders, and then help trying to go for game. So the Burgess strategy works better because he can't be removed anymore, he gets bigger quicker, and he allows us to go for game in situations where other builds would not be able to. And just as a broader thing, it is a slower meta than before. Rayleigh isn't as popular, and Ace and Emu are both control decks of sorts, so the ramping Burgess variety is just stronger than before. Those two add together to a very clear-cut choice. The KO engine doesn't work anymore, and Burgess does, so we have to cut out the engine and lean into Burgess and blockers. Now I want to bring the attention again to the massive gap in our deck list. After cutting out the Dogs, the Augurs, the Tempest Kicks, and the Teaches, we're down 15 cards, and as mentioned, some of the additions are very obvious by putting Burgess and My Age back to 4. But then you're already at a point where you're not sure what do I want to add, right? We know we're playing Burgess with blockers, and so we're going to be filling up with some of that, but with what exactly, and how are we going to add 11 cards into this? Before I start explaining which blockers we might want to put in, I want to explain why we're playing blockers in the first place. Why do we flood with more? And the obvious answer is to defend ourselves, but also Burgess. So the cards from before, Augur and the 7-cost Teach, are replace themselves, and they thus become a more difficult target to get rid of, because even if they do spend resources to kill them, we will get something back. And on top of that, we remove the enemy threats as they're put on the board, so they get significantly less attacks and swings with which to go at us with. And since we no longer have that removal of enemy swings, the enemy will actually attack us. Our life, our Burgess, our searchers, whatever we may have on board that they want to get rid of. And so, to prevent those attacks that we would previously kill, we now have to include the blockers. And that is where a lot of our deck list now comes from, filling those gaps. The first thing we do is adding Kuzans to 4. So, of course, he's a blocker, that's one of the base things I just explained, but he's also a value card. Beforehand, we didn't have as much time, so we would only run him 1 to 2 times, because the games would just pass by too quickly, and he would just not be fast enough. Now, however, with the meta a bit slower, and not as much problems for him, Kuzan will reliably bring you a free Burgess, which is now also stronger than it was before. It can also get us a free Kuzan, which is now safer than it is before, because we're playing more blockers. So Kuzan gets stronger, the things he can get out from the trash get stronger, and we have more time to play him. He's a core card, and will probably be played at 4 consistently throughout the set. Next up, I want to switch from the blockers over to Black Hole. So we have all our engine of KO removal has been removed. And so now we're left with a lot less removal, and you may be wondering, do we add any? And the answer is yes, in the form of this Black Hole. So first, it's nice to have some removal when it really comes down to it. But 2, this card is a perfect answer to some very prominent cards in the meta against the prominent decks. The first thing is that Emu has complete immunity on his characters to removal, but that immunity is from the character effects themselves, which means that Black Hole, which can first negate the effect and then shoot, is the only card in the game that can remove the 5 Elder cards. So we don't run cost reduction, so this will mainly apply to the 4 costs, most importantly the one that draws a card on KO. We can get rid of this beautifully, effectively. We deny the immunity, we deny the card draw, and we get rid of blocker. Black Hole is a beautiful answer to that card. And the other card is the 4-cost Ace from PRBO2. Drawing 2 cards on death as a blocker is a ridiculous ability, especially as a 4-cost 6000. And with the Dawn attached to the leader, this card dying means 3 cards for the ace. Black Hole can completely circumvent that. And even if he does draw 1 from his leader ability, it translates to us using, we both use 4 Dawn, but we lose 1 card and he loses 3, so to speak. Black Hole is a fantastic answer to Marco, and it also remains a solid answer to yellow cards that may occasionally show up. These are the main 2 specific targets, but there is another aspect for which Black Hole is crucial, and that is going for game. Again, we're looking at Ace and Emu. So Ace has late game blockers that he does go for, and Ace will at the end work towards multiple blockers. So for example, if he on 9 Dawn uses the event and plays a 10 cost Newgate, we may answer with our own 10 cost Blackbeard and stun him. The following turn he may play another one, and now the first one is back online as a blocker. We do now have a 10 cost Teach and hopefully some Burgesses built up, but how can we get through the life that he has and all these blockers? Because even if we do swing into a blocker, it probably won't die. And the answer to that is Black Hole. By using 2 of them, you can negate 2 blockers, which usually covers all the blockers your opponent will have. And now all the cards you have will be able to swing face, and that will be presumably a 12 cost Teach and multiple Burgesses, who will now be bigger than they were in previous sets, and can also be at 11 or 12. And when your opponent doesn't have blockers that he was counting on, and suddenly he has, maybe he has 1 life, and now he gets 3 12k swings into his face, that will kill most things in almost all cases. If we don't have that blocker negation, we just do not get through Ace and Emu, because Emu is in a very similar boat, because with his 5 cost he also brings 2 blockers onto the field, the Workury and the Mars. Workury even draws a card on death. So we cannot get through 2 blockers and the life he still has left and the big events he has to counter out of big swings. And having Black Hole fixes that. We have some boards set up with a Burgess or 2, a 10 cost Teach. He plays another 10 cost, tries to kill us, tries to clear their board with something, and then he brings out all the 5 Elders. He'll swing with Nurse Joro, try to kill a Burgess or so, and then have these 2 blockers up. For 8 Dawn, we remove both of them. Well, we remove the Workury and negate the Mars with Black Hole. And then we have, again, those big swings face and hope that it will be enough to kill him. That is how we win against Emu, and that is how we win against Ace, as the 2 meta decks. And when we go back as a result to the list that we're building, we're basically concluding we need many copies of Liberation. At least 3, Liberation of Black Hole. At least 3, I personally would run 4. So our win condition against the top decks requires and revolves around Black Hole. It is both a great answer to some of the 4 costs they play, and also our win condition to wrap up the game. As a result, it is one of the cards that we are putting in to fill the gaps that were created before. So we had 4 black holes here, and already the deck isn't as empty as it was before. We're closing in only 5 cards missing for a full deck. Now, for those 5 cards, Burgess and blockers. What are the other blockers? So, we have a couple of options. The blockers that we're playing using Kuzan, so our 4 and 5 cost Blackbeard blockers, will presumably remain roughly the same. Our options are Devon and Shiryu, and depending on your taste, you may lean into more or less of them. I would say at least 3, but it's also valid to consider a third Shiryu or a second Devon. to get further into the list. That's one part. But then there's also external non-Blackbeard blockers we can do. And the first one is the Vivi. So similar to Caribou for our deck, where the condition is permanently met, she is a one-cost blocker. And against the general lack of removal that the meta decks have against such a thing, this can be equally worth a 5-cost blocker or anything else, and will work to protect us efficiently while also being able to build our board with Kuzan or Burgess, and also protect our Burgesses that we may be unable to counter out of otherwise. This one cost fits smoothly into other plays we may want to do, and allows us to stay alive and allows our keycards to stay alive without having to spend a lot of Dawn. So she's definitely a card we're going to want to include at least once, but presumably a couple of times. Some people are running her 4 times. It depends. Caribou is still just an upgraded form of this. The other card is the new Emu card Warcurie. So he's not leader locked in any way. So he is just an unremovable 4-cost blocker that on KO draws a card. This is a really nice effect. It helps us delay our hand size problem while also being unremovable, which sometimes can be effective. There isn't that much removal that would hit us anyways, but you can rely on it to be alive and block for you. Since it is a 4-cost and generally still dies to swings, it's usually less effective than Vivi, and you would often want to spend the 4 down on something like a Burgess instead. But it remains a strong option and one that you would balance with Vivi or other blockers you may want to put in. And something to consider. Since it's a 1k, we can always cycle it out if we don't want to have too much of it. The last one to consider is Vaskershot once more. Since we're focusing on blockers, he is a worse version of Vivi or Caribou with the advantage of being searchable. So he's somewhat of a middle ground between the 1-cost blockers and our more expensive blockers that we would grab back with Kuzan. If we're going to be searching for a blocker, we might as well search for a bigger one and bring it back with Kuzan. If we want to play a really cheap blocker, we would prefer to have the 1-cost, but having the Vasco lets us reliably find one if we really need to. However, personally, I don't think he's the best thing to go with, since he's in this kind of awkward middle ground, and usually when we're searching, we have more important things we want to grab. The next quick thing to note is that we have a tragic shift in 2Ks. Caribou, of course, stays at 4, it's not even a question. He's one of our best and most efficient cards. But when it comes to 2Ks, previously Stronger was a default 4 of, and that is because he is both a searchable 2K and he actually has an activate main effect that allows you to bring important cards into KO range for your KO engine. However, we no longer have a KO engine, and that means that the Stronger effect is basically negligible. The only KO-based effect based on cost is the Black Hole, and we're usually either using it on a 4-cost or using it to deny blocker, and the killing aspect doesn't matter. Sometimes it can be useful. It also fills the trash with 2 cards for 1 done, which can be useful for clutch plays when you have Burgess on the board and need to go for game. But what that means is Stronger isn't as important, and so as a replacement, Shiryu has come in as an option. He's also a searchable 2k, the advantage being that you can play him for 3. This is worth considering because we don't have any cards to play on 3 done, and sometimes there's a niche situation when he may be the way to go. He does still require an extra Dawn attached to him the next turn to swing for 5,000, and that means that if we were to play him on 3 Dawn, then on 5 we wouldn't be able to play Kuzan. So he kind of messes up our curve if we do have Kuzan, and then on top of that, while he does fill our trash, we first trash 2 cards and then draw 2. So we have to get rid of cards we may want to keep before deciding or before seeing what we're actually going to get. So you're almost never going to want to play this card. Maybe there are some situations where your hand is completely horrible and Shiryu manages to fix that a bit, but it's almost never going to be played. It's just that Stronger is also never going to be played, so you might as well include it. So we have finally shifted away from Stronger. It's still possible to just play for Stronger. These are almost interchangeable now because you will almost never play them, but they're searchable 2Ks, and that's what matters. Next up, we have the tech cards, the last few slots that you may consider, the weird ideas you may have seen on boards, unsure of how valid they are. And I'm going to start with the ones that are just bad. They may seem tempting, don't listen. The first one is the Rush Burgess. I've seen it included in quite a few lists, and it does have that idea of, that extra swing. Who expects Rush in a Blackbeard deck? And sometimes I'm just so close, but I'm just missing that one extra swing. What if I set up Kuzan the turn before so I don't need to spend Dawn on it the turn I'm trying to kill somebody with it, right? But the summary, the quick version is that it's not worth it in Dawn. He's a brick. If you're playing him by himself, he's a 6 Dawn 7000 swing, and you could add that necessary 3k counter by just adding 6 Dawn to your various characters. Um, you could add Dawn to a Lafitte 6 Dawn and make it a 7k swing. And at least Lafitte isn't a brick. And if you're wondering about playing him with the 5 cost Kuzan, you would prefer to just activate the Kuzan the turn before and get the extra draw and grab a Burgess. And then this turn, instead of a sad 5k swing into a 7k swing, you just get an 11k swing right by itself and a bigger body that's going to be a threat in the future. This Burgess is never worth it. Don't run him in your deck. There is, against the meta decks currently as well, there like an extra 7k swing isn't really as much of a difference as swinging big a couple of times. Next up, we have Liberation. So, with so much base, people are also wondering about this card because it has been strong in the past. And here the answer is again no. And the why is similar to last set. There are no good targets. It's useless against Emu. It's useless against Roger. Doesn't really have important targets. Against Ace, there are technically things you would want to kill, like maybe a Yamato and a Marco. Hey, 2 at a time, get rid of them. That's nice and efficient. But for 1, he gets the Marco draw. For 2, we spend our turn doing nothing. 3, we would actually have to not have things on the board, so he has 2 more than us. If he has these 2 on the board, we'd have to have nothing on board. And on the turns before, we're trying to play Burgess, we're trying to play Kuzan, we maybe have set up a Lafitte or a smaller blocker in preparation for late game things, since we're not worried about smaller removal, right? So even if we had good targets in the ace matchup, we would often just not be able to activate it. And after that, it's just always a brick and useless. So Liberation is not it this time. Next up, just for something that, is an idea at least, the 9 cost Kaido can trash a 7 cost. So a cool thought is, okay, what if I did -3 onto a 10 cost that Ace plays and just trash a 10 cost? And while that would be a very cool play, we are not running Augur anymore. We don't have a reliable -3, and then shooting a 7 cost is pretty pointless in basically any matchup. Mm, yeah. Now one tech to actually consider is the previously very useless other 10 cost teach, the promo. It does nothing the turn it's played for 10 Dawn, and that means that most of the time you're just going to die or lose too much of your board. However, he is a win condition by himself. And against Emu and Ace, where you're really trying to close out the game a bit after the 10 Dawn turn, somehow getting through all his defenses, this teach is a way to do that. Getting rid of the blockers with 2 cards using black holes only leaves you 2 Dawn, and often they may be able to counter out of that. Whitebeard may even have, Ace may even have more blockers than that. But Teach fixes all that, so to speak. If you can get a Teach on board at 10, presumably you have already a Burgess, maybe some blockers, maybe 2 Burgesses, and you can get this to, you cannot die on the turn. The turn afterwards, you're going to win. You're going to swing, negate all the blockers that your opponent has. You're also going to negate something like Ace's leader ability, so he doesn't get the draw and he doesn't get the free negation. This first 12k swing will go through, and you will have 10 Dawn to still use onto your leader, your Burgesses, even your Teach, and even if you your other Teach, and even if you just have 2 Burgesses and a leader, then if you assume a 10k Burgess, you can do something like 11, no, start with 12, so 12, 11, 12, 12, ridiculous things like that that will kill basically anything. So while this was previously unusable in this specific situation against both Emu and Ace, and also oddly enough the mirror matchup, this card is a win condition and can win you the game. So if you're considering, okay, do I want to add some more high end, he's worth trying out. Although it should be noted that that's only mostly possible in the sim, because we don't have the card yet in the West, unless you order the Japanese version or something. So only once we get that card here would you be able to use it at locals or something like that. After all that, I want to move to the base list. The base list is what I'm going to say is the minimum that you should always have in your deck before you consider how to fill out the rest of it in OP13. We're going to start with the easiest things. We have 4 of each searcher. Lafitte and Stager given. My age is great with Burgess. Done. We also have 4 Burgesses and 4 Kuzans. Also barely needs to be explained. On top of that, we're going to add, I'm just going to add Stronger as the placeholder here, but it can also be the 3-cost Shiryu. So there are 2Ks, and we're already at 28 cards, so that's nice. I will say that you should have at least 3 blockers of the ones that you can play with Kuzan. So for example, 2 Shiryus and a Devon, but you can do more if you like and switch the balance. You then should probably add 4 Kuzans as a base. It's too valuable, it gets you your big Burgesses back. This as a blocker can just slide in smoothly. You want to include at least 3 Liberations, black holes, for those important cards we mentioned and for finishing games. You still want to include 2 Black Vortexes because Zoro is still in the meta, and it also has other good uses, for example against the 10-cost Rush Roger, and also against the 7-cost 5 Elders that can buff all the other Elders. This can save you there. So at least as a 2 of, I would say include it. And then lastly, not lastly, first, at least 3 teaches. Also just, yeah, included. What can you say? And then some of the non-Blackbeard blockers we mentioned, like Vivi or Mercury, I would add at least, I would add a total of 4, basically. In this case, I'm going to represent it with 2 Vivis and 2 Warcuries. That is a good amount. The blocker like Vivi and Mercury is negotiable, but this is a pretty solid base list and something you can kind of work around, maybe change some little things and then add the last cards you want for your personal taste. And then the last step here for the deck building, what do I actually do? Where do I go with it? The answer to that is I have 4 black holes, just to ensure I can go for game while still killing things early on, both in the Ace and Emu matchup. I add a third black vortex. We have the space for it, and it's quite strong, obviously against Zoro, but also against the other meta decks, and some other offhand things where it can be useful. I also personally add a fourth teach, either a fourth of the blocker teach, or for the spicy variation, one of the promo teach. I'm still testing around with it, but I've seen some success and very fun moments finishing off an emu that otherwise feels very safe, is very satisfying. And then the last card is the leader. So this is the list I currently use. A bit less cards than that is the base. If you need to copy something, copy this. I'll send the list in the description, and I'll also send the base list to work with in the description, so you can copy that and just kind of work on it as you see fit. In summary, due to the shift in the meta of OP13, namely the addition of Emo and Ace and fall off of Blue-Purple Luffy, we have switched from a KO engine to a Burgess focused deck with Burgess and blockers, also abbreviated as B&B. The big gaps have been filled by a whole bunch of blockers, some of them non-Blackbeard, and our gameplay now focuses more on bringing out as many Burgesses as possible as quickly as possible, buffing them up with things like My Age, protecting them and your life with blockers, and then finishing with some negation and big swings. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. I will be releasing some specific guides for the matchups of Ace, Emu, and Roger, alongside the matchups from the most previous sets. So Zoro, Blue Purple, Rayleigh in the following time, but I'm presumably going to start with the 3 meta ones of Ace, Emu, and Zoro. Thank you.